It was a typical morning at the Toyota of Berkeley Service Center in Albany, California. Employees arrived for work, customers dropped off their cars for service, and life moved forward as usual. But for 24-year-old Alonna Gallen, this day, September 21st, 2023, would be her last. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That morning, Alonna was at work, focused on her tasks, just as she had done countless times before. Then, her ex-partner, Lamar Walker, walked through the doors. He wasn't just anyone. He was the father of her 7-year-old son, King. He had come by earlier, bringing her coffee, perhaps an attempt to seem friendly, but behind his calm demeanor lurked something far more sinister. Moments later, he returned. Not with another coffee, not with words of reconciliation, but with a loaded gun. In a matter of seconds, the lives of Alonna, her family, and everyone in that dealership would be forever changed. Gunshots rang out. Panic erupted inside the service center. Employees and customers scrambled for cover as the unthinkable unfolded before their eyes. By the time law enforcement arrived, Alonna was gone, her life stolen in an act of senseless violence. And the man responsible for pulling the trigger? He wouldn't leave the building alive either. This wasn't just another crime story. This was a brutal reminder of the dark reality of domestic violence, a reality that affects millions of people worldwide. A young woman was murdered at her workplace, a child was orphaned in an instant, and a community was left to grapple with the devastating aftermath. Welcome to Unmasked, the channel you come to hear the shocking and the unbelievable. Domestic violence is a silent epidemic. It doesn't always look like bruises or broken bones. It can be control, manipulation, or a history of emotional abuse that escalates into something far worse. For many victims, the most dangerous time is when they try to leave or establish boundaries, a truth painfully evident in Alonna's case. According to reports, Alonna and Lamar were no longer in a relationship, but they shared parenting responsibilities for their son. While details of their history remain private, this case highlights a disturbing pattern. When an abuser feels like they are losing control, they often become most dangerous. Sadly, Alonna is not alone. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence reports that in the United States, nearly 50% of female homicide victims are killed by a current or former intimate partner. These statistics aren't just numbers. They represent real people, real families, and real tragedies. At just 24 years old, Alonna Gallen had already taken on one of the most important roles in her life, being a mother to her 7-year-old son, King. She lived in Richmond, California, a city that, like many others, has its challenges, but is also home to strong, resilient families. Alonna was one of them. Those who knew her described her as a kind, hardworking and dedicated woman, someone who always put her son first. Family members and friends recall her warm smile, her positive energy, and the love she poured into raising King. To Alonna, motherhood wasn't just a responsibility, it was her purpose. She wanted to create a life where her son could grow up feeling safe, loved, and supported. Her bond with King was unbreakable. She did everything she could to give him a childhood filled with love, laughter, and security. She worked hard to ensure he had the best opportunities, making sacrifices like long hours at work and late nights balancing responsibilities. Those who knew her say she always talked about her son, proud of the boy he was becoming. But parenting as a single mother was not always easy. While she and Lamar Walker shared custody of King, their relationship had ended. Details about their history remain unclear, but what is certain is that Alonna was focused on building a better future for herself and her son. She was determined to provide for him, working hard to maintain stability despite any personal struggles she faced. Her life was about more than just survival. It was about progress. She had goals, aspirations, and the unwavering belief that she could create a beautiful life for her child. But tragically, her journey was cut short before she could fully realize those dreams. Alonna wasn't just a devoted mother, she was also a hard-working professional. She had built a promising career at the Toyota of Berkeley Service Center in Albany, California. Her job wasn't just about earning a paycheck, it was about growth, stability, and securing a future for herself and her son. At the dealership, she was known for her work ethic, reliability, and friendly personality. Colleagues respected her, and customers found her to be helpful and kind. The Toyota of Berkeley Service Center is a busy place, with employees handling everything from car repairs to customer service and administrative tasks. It requires patience, professionalism, and the ability to work in a fast-paced environment. Alonna excelled at her job, proving herself as a valued team member in an industry that can often be male-dominated. Co-workers recall her as someone who was always smiling, always willing to help, and always bringing positive energy into the workplace. Whether it was dealing with a frustrated customer or assisting a colleague, Alonna handled it all with grace and professionalism. But work wasn't just about the job, it was about what it allowed her to do. It was her way of building a stable life, providing for King and setting an example for him. She was proud of what she had accomplished, and her future looked bright. The tragedy of September 21st, 2023 was made even more heartbreaking by the fact that it unfolded at her workplace, a place where she was respected, where she should have felt safe. It was supposed to be just another workday. Instead, her life was taken in an act of senseless violence, leaving behind co-workers in shock, a family in mourning, and a little boy without his mother. The morning of September 21st, 2023 started like any other at the Toyota of Berkeley Service Center in Albany, California. The service department was already busy with employees settling into their routines, answering phone calls, checking in vehicles, and preparing for the long workday ahead. Customers were coming and going, completely unaware that within just a few hours, a horrific act of violence would unfold right in front of them. For 24-year-old Alonna Gallen, this was just another day on the job. She was a hard-working employee, focused on providing for her 7-year-old son, King. Her work was important to her, not just as a career, but as a means of creating a stable future for her child. At some point in the early morning hours, Lamar Walker walked into the dealership. He wasn't just a random visitor. He was Alonna's ex-partner and the father of her child. But on that morning, he didn't come in angry or aggressive. Instead, he arrived with a cup of coffee in hand, handing it to Alonna as if everything was fine. Was this a peace offering? An attempt to reconnect? Or was it simply a way to disarm her, to make her think she had nothing to fear? To those around them, the interaction may have seemed normal. Maybe they exchanged a few words. Maybe there was tension beneath the surface, masked by forced smiles and pleasantries. Maybe Alonna had no idea what was coming. After handing her the coffee, Lamar left the dealership. For a brief moment, the world went back to normal. Alonna continued with her work. She had no idea that this was only the first visit, and that the second one would end in unimaginable tragedy. Sometime later, Lamar Walker came back, but this time, he wasn't holding a cup of coffee. This time, he was holding a gun. It's unclear what exactly transpired in those final moments before the shooting. Witnesses would later recall a confrontation, though whether it was heated or one-sided remains unknown. Did Alonna see it coming? Did she realize in those last few seconds that her life was in danger? Then the unthinkable happened. Inside her own workplace with customers and co-workers nearby, Lamar Walker pulled out his firearm and shot Alonna Gallen. Panic erupted. Employees screamed. Some ran for cover, hiding behind desks or fleeing through service bays. Others scrambled to dial 911, their hands shaking as they told dispatchers that a woman had been shot inside the dealership. As Alonna collapsed to the floor, her life fading away, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. A mother, a daughter, a friend, gone in an instant. The Toyota of Berkeley Service Center, a place of business, was now a crime scene. Within minutes, the Albany Police Department received multiple 911 calls reporting an active shooter inside the dealership. Officers from the Berkeley Police Department also responded, given the dealership's proximity to Berkeley city limits. Law enforcement arrived quickly, knowing that every second counted. But by the time they reached Alonna, it was already too late. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Her killer, however, was still inside the building. Reports indicate that Walker had moved to the second floor, where he was still armed. Officers made their way inside, navigating the chaotic scene, their weapons drawn. They didn't know what they were walking into. When they finally found Lamar Walker, they ordered him to drop his weapon, but he didn't comply. Instead, he pointed his gun at the officers. Faced with a deadly threat, police opened fire. Lamar Walker was shot multiple times and died at the scene. In just a matter of minutes, 2 lives were lost inside that dealership, one to murder, the other to police gunfire. But the most heartbreaking reality, 7-year-old son was now an orphan. Yellow police tape was strung across the building. Officers moved quickly, securing the area, collecting witness statements and examining evidence. Investigators worked to piece together what had happened in those critical minutes. For Alonna, there was nothing paramedics could do. She had suffered fatal gunshot wounds, her life ending in an instant. For Lamar, the outcome was the same. The bullets fired by officers had struck him multiple times. He was given no chance to leave that building alive. The contrast between victim and perpetrator was striking. Alonna, an innocent mother and dedicated employee, and Lamar, the man who had stolen her life and ultimately lost his own in the process. This was not how it was supposed to be. What should have been a normal workday had turned into a scene of death, police gunfire, and irreversible consequences. And the most heartbreaking reality was the 7-year-old child who had now lost both his mother and father. No tragedy in this story is greater than what happened to King, Alonna, and Lamar's young son. At just 7 years old, he was now orphaned. One moment he had 2 parents, the next he had none. His mother was gone, her life taken in a senseless act of violence. His father was gone, killed in a fatal encounter with law enforcement. The events that morning were not just a loss for Alonna's family. They were a devastating blow to an innocent child who had no say in the choices made by the adults in his life. He didn't ask for this. He didn't deserve this. The reality for King was stark. His world had been shattered before he was even old enough to fully understand it. Children should never have to grow up with the weight of such loss. But now, King would spend the rest of his life grappling with the pain of losing both his mother and father in one morning of unimaginable horror. In the wake of Alonna Gallen's murder, her family was left to pick up the pieces, not just for themselves, but most importantly for King. They now had the responsibility of raising a child who had been through something no child should ever have to endure. King's future became their top priority. One of the first steps was ensuring that he had access to therapy. At just 7 years old, processing this level of trauma would be an uphill battle. Therapy would help him navigate his grief, understand his emotions, and begin to heal. But therapy was just one part of the equation. King also needed financial support. Recognizing this, Alonna's family and friends launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for his long-term care, education, and emotional well-being. The community responded. Donations poured in, with people moved by the tragic story and eager to help in any way they could. The campaign wasn't just about money, it was about showing King that he was not alone. But no amount of money could ever replace what was lost. King would grow up with questions that had no easy answers. He would one day ask, "Where's my mom?" And he would have to be told the truth, that she was taken away in an act of violence she never deserved. He would ask, "Where's my dad?" And he would have to learn that his father was responsible for that violence, and that he too was gone. The loss of Alonna Gallen was more than just another statistic in the epidemic of domestic violence. It was a devastating reminder of how quickly everything can change. A woman with her whole life ahead of her, a mother who worked hard to create stability for her child, gone. A man who chose violence over restraint, control over peace, death over life, gone. And an innocent child, left to carry the burden of a tragedy he had no part in creating, still here, still trying to move forward. King's life will never be the same, but thanks to his family, his community, and the people who stepped up in his time of need, he will at least have a chance at healing. The question remains, how many more children will have to grow up without parents before domestic violence is taken more seriously? The answer? One is already too many. In the wake of the tragic death of Alonna Gallen, the community came together to mourn her loss and show support for her family. A candlelight vigil was organized to honor her memory, reflecting the deep grief and solidarity felt by those who knew her and even those who did not. The vigil took place on September 30th, 2023, outside the Toyota of Berkeley Certified Service Center in Albany, California, the very place where Alonna had worked and where her life was tragically taken. Friends, family members, colleagues, and community members gathered to pay their respects, holding candles that illuminated the evening sky. The atmosphere was somber, yet filled with a sense of unity. Yvonne Gallen, Alonna's mother, addressed the attendees, sharing heartfelt memories of her daughter. She described Alonna as an incredibly kind, caring, shy, and goofy young lady who had a lot of love to give and more life to live. Her words painted a picture of a devoted mother and a beloved community member whose life was cut short too soon. Demand for transparency. In the aftermath of the incident, there was a significant public demand for transparency regarding the events that led to the deaths of Alonna Gallen and Lamar Walker. Responding to this, the Berkeley Police Department released body camera footage from the officers involved, aiming to provide clarity and maintain public trust. The footage, made public in early November 2023, showed the officers' response upon arriving at the scene. It depicted the tense moments leading up to the confrontation with Lamar Walker, who was armed and unresponsive to commands. The video confirmed that Walker pointed a firearm at the officers, prompting them to discharge their weapons in defense. Lieutenant Tyre Modeste of the Alameda County Sheriff's Office commented on the release, stating, "Ms. Gallen's death was a senseless act of violence that left a young boy without his mother, a child she was co-parenting with Mr. Walker." The release of the footage aimed to provide transparency and address public concerns regarding the officers' actions during the enforcement incident. A stark reminder of domestic violence. The tragic case of Alonna Gallen is not just a story, it's a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence. A young mother was killed in her workplace, a little boy lost both of his parents in a single morning, and a community was left grieving, a senseless act of violence that could have been prevented. Domestic violence is not always easy to recognize. It doesn't always start with physical abuse. It can begin with control, manipulation, emotional intimidation, or isolation. And before anyone realizes how dangerous the situation has become, it escalates into something irreversible. In many cases, victims are most at risk when they try to leave or establish boundaries, just as Alonna was in the process of doing. Her story forces us to ask difficult questions. How many more lives will be lost before domestic violence is taken more seriously? How do we ensure victims have the resources and support they need before it's too late? How can communities, workplaces, and law enforcement work together to prevent tragedies like this from happening again? Alonna Gallen should still be here today. She was a devoted mother, a hard worker, and a person with dreams, goals, and a future. But in one horrifying moment, everything was taken from her. If you're hooked on true crime and love uncovering the darkest secrets behind real-life cases, make sure to subscribe to my channel. New gripping stories drop regularly, ones that will leave you questioning, shocked, and eager for more. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case.